I am Peter Whitmore. I am 73 years old. I was married for 41 years. People looked at my marriage and thought it was a good one, stable, long-lasting. But just before taking her final breath from cancer, my wife looked straight into my eyes and said something that I still hear every single day. Peter, we wasted too much time trying to be right instead of being close. In that moment, I understood a frightening truth. You can live your entire life with someone and still be a stranger in your own home.
For a long time, I believed I was a good husband. I showed up, I went to work every day, I paid the bills, I stayed faithful, I never raised my voice, I never walked away. From the outside, our marriage looked solid, reliable, safe. The kind of marriage people point to and say, that is how it is supposed to last. And for years, I told myself the same thing. We were not unhappy. We did not fight much. There was no drama, no betrayal, no great disaster. Just quiet, predictable, comfortable. And that was the problem. No one tells you this about long relationships. Comfortable is not the same as connected. You can share a house with someone and still feel alone. You can sleep in the same bed and slowly drift miles apart. You can build a life together and forget how to actually be together. I did not notice when it started happening. That is how it usually goes. It does not arrive with an argument or a crisis. It arrives quietly, through routines, through habits, through the slow replacement of curiosity with convenience. At some point, Susan began to suggest small things. She asked if we could take a pottery class together. She wondered why we did not go dancing anymore like we used to. She missed the long conversations we once had late at night. None of these were demands. They were invitations. And every time, I had a reason to say no. I was tired. Work had been stressful. It felt impractical. It seemed unnecessary. I told myself we had already built a life. I believed that providing stability was the same as providing love. I thought the big things mattered more than the small ones. I was wrong. What I did not understand then was this: love does not disappear all at once. It erodes. One missed conversation turns into many. One postponed moment becomes a habit. One not tonight becomes never. And slowly, without meaning to, I taught my wife that her invitations did not matter. Susan adapted. She stopped asking. She stopped suggesting. She stopped reaching. Not because she didn't care, but because reaching out again and again without being met is exhausting. She found her own friends, her own interests, her own world. And I told myself this was normal, that this was what long marriages looked like, that passion fades, that routine replaces excitement. I used the word normal to protect myself from asking harder questions. What if normal was just another word for neglect? What if comfort was not a sign of success, but a warning? We became polite roommates, considerate, civil, functional. We talked about schedules, about groceries, about appointments, about responsibilities, but not about fears, not about dreams, not about who we were becoming. I was present, but I was not engaged. And that distinction matters more than we like to admit. Many people believe relationships fail because of betrayal or conflict, but most do not end that way. They end through indifference, through taking each other for granted, through assuming the other person will always be there. I thought being reliable was enough. I thought consistency could replace connection. I thought not doing anything wrong was the same as doing things right. But love is not passive. It does not survive on autopilot. It needs attention. It needs curiosity. It needs effort even when you are tired. Susan was not asking for grand gestures. She was asking to be chosen, again and again, in small ways. And every time I said later, I was choosing something else. Work, comfort, familiarity. I did not lose my marriage in a single moment. I lost it in thousands of ordinary days where I stopped showing interest in the person beside me. This is the danger of stability. It makes you believe nothing is wrong until you realize something essential is missing. If you are in a long-term relationship, ask yourself this honestly. When was the last time you were truly curious about your partner? Not about what they need to do tomorrow, but about how they feel today, what they fear, what they still hope for. When was the last time you said yes to something simply because it mattered to them? Because one day, the silence you ignore becomes the distance you cannot cross. And by the time you notice, you may already be living with a stranger who once loved you deeply. When you live in that kind of quiet distance long enough, something dangerous happens. You begin to believe you have time. Not because anyone told you so, but because nothing forces you to think otherwise. Days continue. Seasons change. Life moves forward without interruption. And you start postponing the parts of love that require effort. You tell yourself, later. Later when work slows down. Later when money feels safer. Later when life feels less demanding. Later becomes a promise you make to ease your conscience, a way to delay discomfort without admitting you are choosing comfort over connection. I used that word often, not consciously, almost automatically. Whenever Susan spoke about something that mattered to her, I listened just enough to respond, not enough to understand. She talked about a place she dreamed of visiting, Scotland. Her grandmother was from there. It was not just a destination, it was a story, a sense of origin, a way of touching something meaningful about who she was. She mentioned the rolling hills, the small villages, the quiet beauty of the landscape. She did not ask dramatically, she did not demand anything, she simply shared a dream. And every time she did, I responded with practicality. It would be expensive, it was not the right time, we could go someday. I believed I was being responsible. I thought I was protecting our future. What I was actually doing was dismissing her present. Someday is a subtle lie. It sounds reasonable, it sounds patient, it sounds wise. But someday has no calendar, no deadline, no urgency. Someday allows you to avoid choosing. And when you avoid choosing long enough, life chooses for you. Susan stopped bringing it up after a while, not because the dream disappeared, but because she learned it would not be met with enthusiasm. She did not want obligation, she wanted shared desire. That difference matters. People do not want to be tolerated in their dreams, they want to be joined. I only understood this when time suddenly became limited. The diagnosis came quietly. Pancreatic cancer. 1 month we were planning ordinary things. The next we were sitting in hospital rooms measuring life in weeks. In moments like that, the future collapses. All the later you have been saving suddenly expires. There is no more someday. There is only now, and now is painfully small. In those final months, Susan and I talked more honestly than we had in years, not because we became better communicators, but because there was no longer room for avoidance. She told me about things she had let go of over time, not angrily, not accusingly, just honestly. She spoke about moments she felt invisible, about choosing silence to keep peace, about learning to live with less than she hoped for. One night, she spoke about Scotland again. There was no bitterness in her voice, only sadness. I asked her why she never pushed harder, why she never insisted. And she said something I will carry for the rest of my life. She said she did not want me to do it out of duty. She wanted me to want it. She wanted to feel that what mattered to her mattered to me. That sentence revealed something uncomfortable about love. Love is not proven by sacrifice alone. It is proven by interest, by willingness, by attention. You can provide everything and still withhold yourself. I thought love meant being there when things went wrong. I did not realize love also meant showing up when things were ordinary. I believed we would have time to circle back to the things we postponed. I believed life would slow down eventually. It did not. Life does not slow down out of kindness. It accelerates quietly. Years pass while you are waiting for the right moment. And then one day you realize the right moment was the many ordinary days you ignored. The tragedy of someday is not that it delays action, it is that it convinces you delay has no cost. But delay costs intimacy, it costs shared memories, it costs moments that never return. After Susan became ill, every plan felt fragile, every conversation carried weight, and I saw clearly what I had been doing for decades. I had treated time as an unlimited resource. I had assumed our future was guaranteed. But relationships do not thrive on guarantees. They thrive on choices made again and again. When you choose later often enough, you are still choosing. You are choosing absence. You are choosing distance. You are choosing to let the person you love carry their dreams alone. If you are listening to this and thinking of something you keep postponing with someone you care about, pay attention. That trip, that conversation, that shared experience, ask yourself what is really stopping you. Because most of the time, it's not money or timing, it's comfort, it's fear of inconvenience, it's the belief that there will always be another chance. There may not be. Someday feels safe, now feels risky, but love lives in now, and when now passes unchosen, it does not wait, it leaves quietly, taking its opportunities with it. After Susan died, the house became unbearably quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that echoes, the kind that reminds you of every conversation that never happened. I moved through the rooms slowly, touching familiar objects, trying to understand how someone could be so present in my life and then suddenly gone. It was during one of those afternoons that I found her journal. It was tucked away in a drawer I had never opened, not because it was hidden, but because I had stopped being curious long before. Reading it felt like meeting my wife for the first time. Page after page, she wrote about loneliness, not dramatic loneliness, the quiet kind, the kind that exists even when someone is sitting right next to you. She wrote about moments when I was physically present but emotionally absent, times when I listened just enough to respond, not enough to understand, times when my attention drifted to work, to screens, to anything easier than connection. What hurt the most was not what she wrote about me, it was what she wrote about herself. She wrote about trying not to ask for too much, about lowering expectations to avoid disappointment, about convincing herself that this was just how marriage worked after many years. She was not angry. She was tired. That is what emotional neglect looks like. It does not explode. It fades. I had always believed that relationships were damaged by big mistakes, infidelity, cruelty, abandonment. But that was not what broke us. What broke us was my silence, my avoidance, my comfort with surface-level connection. I told myself I was a stable presence, that I was reliable, that I was doing my part, but I never asked myself whether Susan felt known. Being known is different from being loved in theory. It means someone sees who you are becoming. It means your inner world is not a mystery to the person beside you. Susan felt unseen while sharing a life with me, and I did not notice because I never asked. There is a quiet danger in pride. Pride convinces you that vulnerability is weakness, that admitting fear or confusion diminishes you, that saying, "I am fine" is safer than saying, "I am struggling." So I stayed composed, I stayed capable, I stayed distant. I rarely said I was afraid, I never said I felt lonely, I did not say I needed help, and in doing so, I taught my wife that there was no space for her to share those things either. Connection does not survive perfection, it survives honesty. Susan did not need me to have all the answers, she needed me to be open, to say, "I do not know," to say, "I am scared too," to say, "I need you." Instead, I offered reassurance without presence, solutions without listening, stability without intimacy. In her journal, Susan wrote about hoping that the man she married would return, not a different man, just the earlier version of me, the version who was curious, who asked questions, who wanted to know her thoughts even when they were inconvenient. I was there every day, but emotionally, I might as well have been somewhere else. This is the part people misunderstand about relationships. You do not lose them because you stop loving. You lose them because you stop engaging, because you stop choosing to see the person in front of you as someone new, changing, complex. I lived with my wife for decades and assumed I knew her, but knowing someone once is not the same as knowing them now. People evolve, their fears shift, their dreams deepen or fade. If you are not paying attention, you miss it. After Susan passed, people told me I had been a good husband. They meant well, but I know the truth. I was an adequate husband. I met the minimum requirements. I did not cheat. I did not leave. I did not cause obvious harm. But love demands more than the absence of wrongdoing. It asks for participation, for presence when it would be easier to withdraw, for difficult conversations instead of comfortable silence, for emotional risk. I failed to offer those things consistently, and now I live with the understanding that regret does not come from what you did wrong, it comes from what you did not do. The questions you did not ask, the truths you did not share, the moments you chose comfort over closeness. If you are listening to this while still sharing your life with someone, hear this clearly. It is not too late to be known. It is not too late to know them, but it requires intention. It requires saying uncomfortable things in small moments, not dramatic confessions during crises. It requires choosing honesty over image. Ask your partner how they are really doing. Listen without fixing. Share something real about yourself, not because something is broken, but because connection needs maintenance. Do not wait for loss to teach you what presence could have. I learned too late that love is not proven by endurance alone. It is proven by attention, by showing up emotionally, not just physically, by staying curious long after familiarity sets in. Susan was right. We wasted too much time being right instead of being close. And if my story has any purpose now, it is this. Let it interrupt you before life does. Choose closeness while you still can, because one day the silence will arrive whether you are ready or not, and on that day you will wish you had asked more questions when the answers were still there.
For a long time, people told me I was a good husband. They meant it kindly. They saw the years. They saw the stability. They saw that I stayed. But they were wrong. I was not a good husband. I was an adequate one. I did not cheat. I did not abandon her. I met the minimum requirements and convinced myself that was enough. But love does not survive on the absence of mistakes. It survives on intention.
On presence. On choosing the other person again and again, even when it would be easier not to. On my desk now sits a photograph of Susan from our honeymoon in 1972. She is smiling into the sunlight, full of hope, full of plans for a life we would share. And I can see it clearly now. Over the years, I allowed a quiet sadness to settle behind that smile. Not through cruelty, but through inattention, through waiting, through assuming there would always be more time. If you are listening to this and feel a small heaviness in your chest, do not ignore it. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not wait until life slows down. Do not wait for someday. Ask the person beside you today what matters to them. Ask if you can be there with them in it. And if this story stirred something in you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes, saying it out loud is the first step toward choosing closeness while you still can. Because one day, the chance to ask may no longer be there.